Hi, thanks for taking the time to watch this interviewing workshop. In this session, we're going to be learning about the employer perspective, interviewing basics, interviewing questions, and then do some follow up and cover some attire that you should wear in an interview. So, when you first think about interviewing, you have to realize everyone gets nervous. It's just like any other skill. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Also, it's a two-way street. You're interviewing the employer. You want to see if this is a place that you fit in, that you feel like you really want to work at. And then always just think of the interview as your friend. They're not out to get you. They just want to get to know you. What do they want to know about you? So can you do the job? That looks at your ability and your skills. Will you do the job? Do you have the motivation to want to do it, to wake up every day, come to work, and do a good job for the company? Are you promotable? That means they bring you in at an entry level position and then promote you in the organization. That's what they're looking for. Will you fit into the organizational culture? And that just comes from you asking questions as well. But is it a good fit for you? Is it a large organization? That's what you wanted? Or is it a mid-size or a small company? You want to work in small teams? Does it provide you with the organizational culture that you're looking for? And finally, are you sincerely interested in the job? Don't apply for jobs that you're not interested in because it's a hard sell in an interview when you're trying to sound like you're really interested when you're not. And you don't want to have to fake it in an interview. Here are the top 5 skills that employers look for. So number 1, communication skills. And this comes in the form of writing, reading, and communicating verbally. Having a strong work ethic to go along with that. Demonstrating teamwork skills. And that means playing nice in the sandbox, working well with others. And you do this in school. You work on teams. You are maybe an athlete on a team. And then also using your analytical skills. Can you problem solve? Can you think through a problem and come up with a creative solution and provide examples for doing so? And then also having motivation and showing initiative. Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want their employees to be motivated and have initiative to come up with new ideas to, think about new ways of doing business? How do you demonstrate these employable qualities? So you want to show the appropriate responses to questions, and that means listen to the questions carefully. Answer with enthusiasm, confidence, be genuine, show initiative, and kind of demonstrate some clear career goals. That means have an idea of where it is you want to go. So preparing is key. You want to determine what the job objective is. Identify what you can offer the employer, so knowing your skills is very important. Review your resume or the application you filled out. Research the employer and practice for the interview. So interviewing is really 3 keys. It's knowing yourself, knowing the employer, and knowing the position. If you have those 3 areas down, you'll be able to succeed in any interview. Here's some different types of interviews. Phone interviews, virtual interviews, meaning it could be a Google group, a Skype interview, or a different platform. An on-campus interview happens when you're in school as a student at UNC. Employers come on campus to interview you here. And then on-site or panel interviews are typically your second round interviews, which happen at the place of business. And it could be with one person, it could be with more than one person, a panel, and it could be through multiple interviews throughout the day. So here's some basics. You want to pay attention in the nonverbal communication. Maintain eye contact, have a good handshake, firm, but not a death grip, certainly not a wet noodle. Maintain good posture, carry your volume in a steady manner, and then watch your facial gestures. We all have these nonverbal communication tactics that we use, and mostly it's when we're talking with friends, when we're in a casual environment, but you want to make sure that you are maintaining good eye contact. Doesn't mean staring them, in the face continually or having a stare down. It just means engaging with them and make sure you're smiling. Secondly, you want to slow down and think before you respond. The employers are more concerned with how well you answer the question versus how fast you answer it. And always use concrete, specific examples. Show me, don't tell me. So this is something that we employ in career services, and it's called the STAR method. It has different acronyms. Some people say BAR. STAR is situation, task, action, result. And if you can answer any behavioral question using this method, you'll be in good shape. So here's the types of questions you may encounter. Questions about you. General questions, questions that are probing your resume, behavioral and situational questions, or role play and scenarios. Questions will also come into play about the organization or the industry. So you want to understand the position. You want to know what's going on in the industry or have it showing recent trends. And that just means do a Google search for what's going on with that company in the news. And you want to know about specific attributes of that organization, who their competitors are, and your genuine interest in the organization. What about this organization interests you? So here's some general questions. Tell me about yourself. So what that means is, where have you been? Where are you now? And where are you going? And that's kind of like your elevator pitch, your 30-second commercial, your 2-minute commercial. But this is where it's brief. You don't want to give them everything in the kitchen sink in your first response, because otherwise they don't need to ask you any other questions. So you want to try and keep it under 2 minutes. Other general questions are walk me through your resume. That doesn't mean specifically walk them through every piece of information on your resume. You want to hit the highlights. Why did you choose your major? Make sure it's a compelling reason. Don't ever say, oh, I just fell into it. Explain why you chose your major. There had to be, some good decision-making skills behind it. What are your 3 greatest strengths and weaknesses? In this one, I would always start out with your weakness and then end with your strengths, because then you're ending it on a high note. And by the time you've answered your strengths, you pretty much have given the message that they don't probably even remember what the weakness was. But always back up those strengths with examples. For example, you could say, well, I'm highly organized, efficient, and a critical thinker. I've demonstrated organizational skills by working on this project. And I've demonstrated being a great critical thinker when I worked on this team and we did ABC. So always provide examples. What would you like me to know about you that isn't on your resume? This is a way for them to get to your personality. What do you do for fun? Last one, why should we hire you? And this goes back to reiterate your experience. Reiterate why you're interested in this job. What makes you stand out amongst other candidates? So behavioral questions, these are the most common types of questions asked in interviews. The reason is because the best predictor of future behavior is how you handled something in the past. So you always want to identify 3 to 4 challenging situations that you've faced successfully, and always demonstrate relevant skills or traits that can illustrate those samples. Prepare a mental outline to describe each, and always include situation, task, action, result. And that outline, that mental outline, can include the STAR method. And if you can visualize it, it's sometimes easier to bring back to your front memory when you're called upon with a certain questions. And always choose the most vivid, powerful, relevant, and really recent examples that you can. Now, if you say, well, I have a stronger example that was a little further away, it was a long time ago. Well, how long? If it was a year ago, always, if it's more vivid than a more recent example, go with the more vivid. Here are some examples. Give me an example of a time when you faced an ethical dilemma, solved a difficult problem, worked with a difficult customer, took a risk and failed, demonstrated leadership skills, served as a member of a team. So you can kind of see that if you are working with one of these questions and you're looking at it from a STAR perspective. So tell me about a time you worked as a member of a team. Okay, situation. What was the situation in which this team was created? Why was I working on this team? Task. What was my task on this team? Action. What was my action? What did I do as a member of this team? And the R, the result. What was the result of my task and action? So it's about you. Even though it's a team member question, it's really tell me what you did on this team. I don't want to know what the team did. I want to know what your part was on this team and what was the result. Role play and scenario questions. So here's a sample. If a difficult client walked in demanding a service that was unavailable, how would you respond? So you can sometimes get these in interviews and you want to just give your best example of what you would do. If you have never experienced this, you want to be hypothetical then. Well, that's never happened to me, but if it did, this is what I would do. The question there, sell me this pen, it could be anything. That's just, when employers ask you questions like that, they want to see how you can think on your feet. And that means you look at that pen or whatever object is they're presenting you with, and you really tell them why they want that object. And so that means describing it and highlighting the benefits of it and what it can do for them. But don't be intimidated by those questions. They're just trying to see how you handle things. Questions will always arise about the company and the industries. So tell me something about our company that isn't on our website. And that means you need to do a little bit more homework than looking on their website. What about our company interests you? Who are our competitors? What about this industry attracts you? So see, if you don't do any research on the company, you're never going to be able to answer these questions. So make sure you do your homework. Always ask questions. So at the end of your interview, they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for us? The worst thing you can do is say, no, thank you, I'm good. That sends a message that, oh, you didn't really enjoy the interview and you're not really interested in the position anymore. So here are some samples that you can draw from. What is a typical day like in this position? How is an employee evaluated? Can you describe a typical first-year assignments? What are the challenging facets of the job? What qualities are you looking for in your new hires? What have other new hires done in order to be successful? And why do you enjoy working for this organization? People love to talk about what they do at certain companies. So ask them that. That's a really good question because it puts it on them. And now you're hearing a little bit more insight into the organizational culture and the types of jobs that they're actually doing there. Topics to avoid during your first interview, anything on salary and benefits. Personal information that is protected, and that means, what your marital status is, what your orientation is, any preferences you have that are off the table, those should never come up. Always avoid negative comments about past employers, professors, classmates, or coworkers, because that just makes it sound like you're catty if you are talking about, colleagues that way. And then personal questions of the interview. Never ask personal questions like, oh, are you married? Oh, do you have kids? Those are not appropriate for interviews. And then how much small talk is appropriate? Enough to where if it's just taking up a brief amount of time, it's kind of like the icebreaker. You don't want to keep asking questions just to have that small talk. Following up in ethics. Always follow up from an interview with an email, letters, and phone calls. So email for that initial thank you. And usually within 48 hours is the maximum. If you're also sending a hard copy thank you letter, you can send that in the mail, but always make sure you send an email because if you interviewed and 10 other people interviewed and you're sending a hard snail mail copy and everybody else emailed, they're getting yours last. Okay. And during the interview, you can ask them about timeline. And if it's getting past the timeline and you haven't heard, it is appropriate to give them a call and say, I'm just calling to follow up on my interview and to see if any decisions have been made. So ethics, be honest about your credentials. And that means, never make up anything, be completely honest. If you verbally accept a job, that is accepting. It's not, oh, I didn't sign anything. Well, if you made a verbal commitment, that's your word. Once you accept a job offer or an internship offer, do not continue to interview after you've accepted. And then once you have accepted, do not renege on an accepted offer. And that means that, oh, I changed my mind. I don't want to do that anymore. Remember, your verbal commitment is your word. Here's just some info on attire. So dress appropriately for the culture of the position. Always err on the side of being overdressed. It's better to be overdressed than underdressed, especially for an interview. The interview is a great opportunity for you to see what the culture is and to see what people are wearing themselves. Once you have the job, you can dress like everybody else, but for the interview, always go a little bit more on the conservative side. And here you can see two examples of someone in a men's suit and someone in a female suit. Now, a pantsuit for women is completely acceptable, even though this picture is of a skirted suit. Most on-campus interviews expect formal attire, so that means if they're happening in our office or around campus, formal attire is expected unless you have been told otherwise, or if you're in a technical field and it's not expected of you. And then always, no gum, smoking, excessive jewelry, or club attire. Don't come to an interview like you just got out of the club with the high heels, so inappropriate. Never chew gum, and don't smoke before an interview because it just carries on your clothes. So we are social. UNC UCS is on pretty much every aspect of social media. Feel free to follow us on Instagram, Pinterest. Pinterest is great for if you have questions about interview attire, feel free to take a look at that, as well as Twitter and Facebook. If you have any questions, please give us a call or feel free to stop by UCS any day, Monday through Friday, between 1 and 4 for drop-in hours. Thank you.